Well, let's speak to Liam Deacon now, former head of press for the Brexit Party and now political comms consultant at Pagefield. Liam, a warm welcome to you. You would have worked with Nigel Farage extensively, of course. What's he like to work with?
Nigel, firm but fair. He's, you know what he wants. He speaks his mind. It almost sounds like I'm reeling off a load of cliches about Nigel Farage right now.
Whenever anyone says firm but fair, you're basically talking about someone who, in no uncertain terms, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they're very clear with what they want, and if they don't get what they want, they are very clear about that as well.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we saw vintage Nigel Farage today. He got up on stage and he delivered a very difficult message. It was what political journalists love to call a screeching U-turn, and almost any other journalist, politician in this country would have been really attacked for it, because he delivered it with such clarity and such honesty, and he spoke from the heart. I thought about it. I was wrong. I've changed my mind. These are things we rarely hear from politicians. He has delivered a very, very difficult political message seamlessly. And he's sort of done a big U-turn and come out looking very strong. It's really unusual. It really underlines what a good communicator he is. And it's something I experienced working for him day to day. He was a pleasure to work with. It was obviously a difficult job for other reasons. He's an unpopular man in certain parts of the country, and it was a very demanding job, and it was a very difficult job. But personally, working with Farage, or Nigel, as he likes to be called face to face, was always a pleasure.
How did you deal with the not so popular moments? How did you manage that? And did it ever get to Nigel Farage?
Yes. I mean, firstly and foremost, we had very good security. The threat upon Nigel,
he was
and
in
his
danger
staff,
then at various points.
Yes, it's quite physical. I mean, that was during that election that I fought with him. There was the phenomenon, I don't know if your listeners will remember, of milkshaking, which was violently assaulting people on the street for social media clicks. And a large part of the political class thought it was very funny because it was Nigel Farage and his people. But it's quite intimidating when you're going to work every day. Our office was invaded by Extinction Rebellion. They took photos of all hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of target polling and all sorts of things, and intimidated people at their place of work. It's hard work working for Nigel Farage, but not because of Nigel Farage, because of the political system. But I do happen to know, I know people across the political divide, and politics is a tough business. I'm not going to sit here and cry me a river, and we're the only people. People go into politics because they love it, not because they want an easy life. So enough about me.
How much does Nigel Farage love politics, and how much does Nigel Farage love himself?
Nigel Farage loves this country, firstly and foremost. It's a very good question you're asking. And I concede that everyone in politics, to a degree, has to like the sound of their own voice, or they wouldn't try and talk
standard
for a living.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and that's across the political divide. And good communication comes to people politically who sometimes do have an ego and are strong personalities. That I concede. But Nigel Farage, he's a conviction politician. I don't think he's standing, as is your question implies, because he wants the attention. I do think the reason he gave today that he didn't feel good about it is the words he used today. I happen to know I was with his team the night after they put out the statement which referenced America. Immediately, they were unhappy with the reaction that you only needed to read some of the comments from the core support, the core reform support below the line. They weren't happy that he referenced America and appeared to prioritize America over the UK. He knew from the very beginning that they'd worded that wrong, and he felt bad about it. And he felt that it was going to damage his prospects in this general election, and his prospect he views as the right thing for the country. He's a conviction politician. You cannot doubt him on that he does believe what he says. He's not in this simply for his own betterment. But it's also true, the reason he hesitated for so long, and I also worked at GP News for a time, and I didn't work directly with him there, but I saw he loved that job. He meant what he said there. But I mean, let's talk about the actual announcement and what it means rather than Nigel Farage and sort of his personal thing. I mean, instantly, the big thing that the Conservatives, the decision that they've made, the blunt decision that they've made, is really to double down on the reform vote during this general election. National service, talking about a quadruple lock on pensions. They really are zooming in on that older vote, that vote that is floating between the Conservatives and the Tory. They've doubled down on firming up their base, is the political word that we use. They're not reaching out across the divide. That's their entire political strategy. Nigel Farage would have seen that. He would have seen the polls, which haven't been moving a great deal. There is some, I think JPI partners are saying that there is evidence that some unknown are becoming more amenable to Tories, in
although the
particular older one.
large poll today shows it, moving in
Absolutely
entirely the wrong direction even further.
Yeah, and James Johnson has come out and said today, really clearly and firmly, and he's been polling Clacton, that for Nigel can win. So he would have been seeing all of this. He would have been observing the Tory strategy. And what he's done now causes the Conservatives a huge headache, because their strategy was clear. They've expended all their political capital on focusing on their core vote, not reaching out to younger voters. Some could say it's a very short-term, termist political strategy to focus exclusively on the over 65s, when people, there's years in the future that they're going to have to think about. And Nigel Farage would have seen all that, and he's completely torpedoed their strategy now by basically saying to that group of people, no, I'm back, I'm listening to you as well. And the Tories are in a really, really difficult position now. So he's come back because he's watched all that happen as well. He's a great political strategist, and he's picked his moment. I genuinely, when he said that he wasn't standing, I was not surprised. I wrote a couple of articles for the newspaper saying that this was a huge win for the Tories. So did some other commentators. And I know that the Reform Party were briefing.
And there were some rumours, weren't there, that actually it was a kind of a bit of behind closed doors discussion with the Conservative Party that Nigel Farage might have not stood, because further down the line, perhaps there could be some sort of alliance with the Conservative Party. Did you hear any of those?
That's not what I've heard. I was in the room in 2019, and there was no formal discussions between the Conservatives and what was then the Brexit Party, which is extraordinary.
But then the party offered to step away, didn't it, in certain constituencies, the Brexit Party?
Yeah, and that was a unilateral decision that Nigel made, because he decided that that election would have decided whether or not Brexit was delivered or not. Remember, we hadn't left the European Union at that point, and Boris and Dominic Cummings were saying very, very forthright things about getting Brexit done. The Tory, to bring up that phrase that I thought you hope you all left behind in 2019.
You're triggering us all now.
Yeah, I know. But that was.
But
they
did get Brexit done, to be fair.
They did get Brexit done, and for Nigel, I mean, I was in the room at that point, and a lot of people, most of our candidates, all of our candidates actually, didn't know he was going to make that announcement when he made it in 2019. A lot of them had spent a lot of time campaigning. It was quite late. That would have been a much longer campaign, and there was a lot of disquiet in the room across the country among Reform UK candidates that he had done that unilaterally. And he tried. He had tried to speak to the Tories whether or not they would have come to a deal. I do think it's a great act of sabotage, of self-harm, that the Conservatives, big C Conservatives, cannot think more broadly about the small C Conservative movement in this country, and it's got this huge fracture in it. The Conservative Party are famously good at forming grand coalitions, anti-Labour coalitions. They talk about the big tent, but they've decided somewhere along the line that big tent doesn't extend to people that step outside of the Conservative Party, and they refuse time and time again to seriously engage in talks with Nigel. And I think that is the case now, but I can't confirm it.